Two things happened within hours of each other today.
Alert. The UN
At the United Nations, Russia and China killed the last diplomatic hope for reopening the Strait of Hormuz. And somewhere in Iran, mothers linked arms around a power plant, waiting to find out if the President of the United States would bomb them at 8 p.m.
This is a Fox News alert. The UN vote on a resolution to open the Strait of Hormuz has failed. The exact language of that was it strongly encourages states interested in the use of the commercial maritime routes in the Strait of Hormuz to coordinate efforts. Now, who could possibly be against this? Well, they technically had enough votes for this to pass. However, two members, permanent members of the Security Council issued a veto, and that is enough to strike this down. I wonder who those permanent members were. China, Russia, the predictable actors in Russia speaking at this moment as they vote to down that resolution to protect the Strait of Hormuz. More on that as it develops. But we've been following this hour the story of human chains that are being formed in front of several power plants in Iran. You are looking at these images. They're jarring to look at, Lisa, because I think Emily made a very key point here. At least in one video that we've seen, we have two that we've been playing. This is entirely women. This is children. These are the most vulnerable members of Iranian society and those who are targeted most. And that is who you are circling around your plant, your women and your children.
Well, Kaylee, think about the juxtaposition between what we're seeing here and what President Trump and the United States military just did to rescue two of our military men behind enemy lines. President Trump said no man left behind. The Iranian regime, they're willing to sacrifice their own people. They're willing to put them out to slaughter. And then you look at the contrast here in the United States, the lengths that the United States military went to get our people behind, because we don't leave a man behind. We value human life, so much so that even former Obama Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson said that that mission was probably more daring and complex than the Osama bin Laden raid. So that's what we're willing to do in the United States of America. So contrast that with what these sick, evil, you know what, are willing to do. I can't say the word on national TV, but you know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. And let's be exceedingly clear. The power committing war crimes is the Iranian government, is the terrorist regime that is recruiting child soldiers as young as 12. But the great irony here is the UN takes great joy in targeting Western democracies and targeting countries like Israel, while turning a blind eye all too often to regimes like this one.
Yeah, where's the UN been relative to the 30 to 40,000 Iranians killed by their own government? Where are they now as the Iranians put out human shields, which is just such a stark contrast to the mindset difference between us and them? Think about the mindset there. What they're counting on is the idea that we have a level of morality, let's call it wartime etiquette, whatever term you want to put on it, that we won't attack anything that could endanger women and children. Reverse that now. Could anybody imagine a circumstance wherein the Iranians would care about American women and children somehow or other during an act of war? When you consider what they did, for instance, to our hostages and what happened, by the way, on 7 October relative to Israel, it's very hard to imagine that that is in any way, shape, or form commensurate. But, of course, that's a little bit too much for the UN to recognize. That whole thing is a complete scam. We pay for it, for them essentially to take a stick to us. I have to tell you, Donald Trump's looking at NATO. UN needs a look, too, because UN has really, really, I think, outlived its usefulness.
And make no mistake, the terrorist regime wants to see civilian casualties. That is what they want.
Of course they do. So do the Democrats, so that they can go at Trump and say, look at what you did.
It is sick.
Hey, everyone. I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.
Fox News covered both stories. It got the facts largely right. And then it did something unforgivable. It used the images of women and children standing in front of power plants not as a moment of human reckoning, but as a prop to attack Democrats. Let's start with what's actually happening on the ground, because the people in those images deserve that much. Iran's Fars news agency posted verified video showing hundreds of people who had answered a call by an Iranian government official to act as human shields in front of the country's power plants. The official, Alireza Rahimi, identified as Secretary of the Supreme Council of Youth and Adolescents, called on all young people, athletes, artists, students, and university students and their professors to form human chains. President Masoud Pezeshkian posted on X that 14 million Iranians had answered campaigns urging people to volunteer to fight and said he would join them, while a Revolutionary Guard general urged parents to send their children to man checkpoints. The Fox hosts framed this entirely as the Iranian regime cynically using its population as shields, contrasting it with the U.S. rescue of the F-15 crew. That contrast isn't wrong on its face. The Iranian government is, without question, placing civilians in harm's way. Recruiting child soldiers and encouraging families to stand in front of military targets is a violation of international humanitarian law. But here's what the segment refused to engage with. Those people are also standing in front of the infrastructure that keeps them alive. Iran's power plants provide electricity to hospitals, homes, water systems, and food storage. Trump has threatened to destroy all of Iran's power plants and bridges if Tehran does not meet his 8 p.m. Eastern deadline. He said the entire country can be taken out in one night, and that a whole civilization will die tonight. When the President of the United States says a civilization will die tonight, and civilians form human chains around the infrastructure that keeps them alive, calling those people merely human shields misses something essential. Some of them are mothers who know that if those generators stop, the ventilator in the hospital down the road stops too. The milk in the refrigerator spoils. The water treatment plant goes dark. That isn't regime loyalty. That is survival instinct. The Fox segment did not make this distinction. It could not, because making it would require acknowledging that the threat to bomb civilian infrastructure creates the conditions that produce human shields. You cannot threaten to destroy every power plant in a nation of 88 million people and then express outrage when civilians stand in front of them. Russia and China vetoed a UN Security Council resolution aimed at reopening the Strait of Hormuz that had been repeatedly watered down in hopes those two countries would abstain. The vote was 11 in favor, 2 against, and 2 abstentions from Pakistan and Colombia. The Fox segment treated this as a straightforward villain story, Russia and China protecting Iran. The reality is more layered. Russia and China strongly defended their opposition, both directly citing Trump's threat to end Iran's civilization as confirmation that the proposal would have given U.S. military action international legal cover. In other words, they argued, not unreasonably, that passing a resolution hours before an American president threatened to annihilate a country's infrastructure would amount to retroactive authorization of that destruction. The initial Bahrain proposal would have authorized countries to use all necessary means, UN wording that includes military action, to ensure transit through the Strait of Hormuz. After opposition from Russia, China, and France, it was revised to eliminate all references to offensive action, then further weakened to eliminate any reference to Security Council authorization altogether. Even in its final toothless form, merely strongly encouraging coordination, it was vetoed. This matters because it means there is no international legal framework for reopening the strait, no UN mandate, no multilateral authorization. The world's most important energy choke point remains under Iranian control, and every avenue for changing that, American military force, allied coalition, or UN resolution, has either been abandoned, refused, or blocked. A whole civilization will die tonight. Those 6 words, posted by the President of the United States on the morning of April 7, 2026, may be the most consequential sentence uttered by an American leader in the 21st century. Iran's UN representative Amir Saeed Iravani said the president's threats constitute incitement to war crimes and potentially genocide. Whether or not Trump follows through, and he has extended previous deadlines multiple times, the threat itself has consequences. The IRGC warned that Iran would deprive the U.S. and its allies of the region's oil and gas for years, and expand its attacks across the Gulf region if Trump carries out his threat. That is not an empty warning. Iran has already struck energy infrastructure across 9 countries. Even before the deadline, renewed American and Israeli airstrikes hit targets across Iran, killing nearly 3 dozen people. A strike destroyed half of the Khorasani synagogue and nearby residential buildings in Tehran. A synagogue in Tehran destroyed in a war ostensibly fought to protect the Jewish state. The Fox segment did not mention this. It was too busy arguing that Democrats want to see civilian casualties. What the Fox segment said about Democrats, and why it disqualifies the analysis. Here is the exact exchange from the transcript. And make no mistake, the terrorist regime wants to see civilian casualties. That is what they want. Of course they do. So do the Democrats, so that they can go at Trump and say, look at what you did. It is sick. There it is. On a day when women and children are standing in front of power plants waiting to find out if they'll be bombed, on a day when the United Nations failed to pass even a watered-down resolution to protect shipping, on a day when the president said a whole civilization could die, a Fox News host said Democrats want civilian casualties. This is not analysis. This is not journalism. This is partisan venom deployed in the middle of a humanitarian crisis, using the bodies of Iranian women and children as a political weapon against domestic opponents. It degrades the discourse. It dishonors the dead. And it fails the American viewer who deserves to understand what is actually happening in the world. What's actually at stake tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, the president's deadline expires. He has extended deadlines before, on March 23rd, March 30th, and April 6th. He may extend again, or he may not. If he follows through, every power plant in Iran goes dark. 88 million people lose electricity. Hospitals lose power, water treatment stops, food spoils. The cascade of civilian death from infrastructure collapse would dwarf every casualty figure in this war combined, not in weeks, but in days. If he doesn't follow through, his credibility on threats erodes further. Iran learns that deadlines are performative. The strait stays closed, gas keeps climbing. Either way, the women in those human chains go home tonight to houses that may or may not have electricity tomorrow. Their children will sleep in beds that may or may not be warm. And the news coverage they received in America today called them shields, called their suffering a Democratic talking point, and never once asked the simplest question: what did those women do to deserve any of this?